My name is Marion, and at 58 years old, I never expected my retirement years would include such heartbreak. After 30 years teaching math, I finally bought my dream car, a restored 1967 Mustang that connects me to my late husband, James. When my daughter Stephanie demanded I sell it to fund her lavish wedding, I refused. What followed was manipulation, betrayal, and a fake reconciliation dinner where I found myself facing 2 lawyers and my ex-husband. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button before I share how standing my ground changed everything. I spent over 3 decades as a dedicated high school math teacher in a small suburban district outside Portland. The students kept me young at heart, even when the administrative paperwork tried to age me prematurely. Teaching wasn't just my career, it was my calling. I loved watching that moment when a concept suddenly clicked for a struggling student. My late husband James and I built a good life together. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable. James worked as a civil engineer for the county designing bridges and infrastructure projects. We met in our 30s, both of us coming out of previous relationships. For me, that meant my first marriage to Richard, which gave me my daughter Stephanie, but ended painfully after 7 years when Richard's wandering eye became a full-blown affair. James became the stable, loving father figure Stephanie needed, though she always maintained a close relationship with Richard, who spoiled her during his weekend visits to compensate for his absence. James never tried to replace Richard, but he showed up consistently for baseball games, school concerts, and midnight homework sessions. One dream James and I shared was owning a classic 1967 Mustang, the same model his father owned when James was a boy. We'd spend Saturday mornings visiting car shows, admiring the sleek lines and imagining ourselves cruising down coastal highways. Someday, we'd say, when the mortgage is paid and Stephanie's college fund is secure, that someday never came during our marriage. James was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer when I was 53. The disease took him quickly, just 8 months from diagnosis, to the day I held his hand for the last time. The medical bills, even with insurance, depleted much of our savings. 2 years after James passed, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I took $20,000 from my retirement fund and purchased a 1967 Mustang that needed significant restoration. My friends thought I was having a midlife crisis. Perhaps I was, but this car represented something more, a connection to James and a project to pull me out of grief. The restoration became my therapy. I joined a local classic car club where I met wonderfully supportive people who taught me everything from engine maintenance to upholstery repair. Every Saturday, instead of visiting car shows, I was in someone's garage, learning how to sand down rust or replace weather stripping. The community became my lifeline when grief threatened to pull me under. Meanwhile, Stephanie had built her own life. Now, 32, she worked as a marketing executive for a cosmetics company. She'd always been ambitious and status-conscious traits that intensified during her college years at an expensive private university that Richard insisted on funding. When Stephanie announced her engagement to Bradley, a financial analyst from a wealthy family, I was genuinely happy for her. Bradley seemed kind and steady, qualities I hoped would balance my daughter's more materialistic tendencies. Their relationship had progressed quickly, meeting at a charity fundraiser and engaged within 8 months. I hoped the wedding preparations might bring us closer. Though we spoke regularly, there had always been a certain distance between us that grew after James died. Stephanie hadn't been particularly close to her stepfather, but his death meant the loss of the mediator, who often smoothed our occasional mother-daughter conflicts. The first hints of trouble emerged during an early wedding planning lunch. Stephanie showed me venue options that made my eyes widen, exclusive resorts and historic mansions with rental fees exceeding my annual property taxes. "Honey, these are beautiful, but they're very expensive," I said cautiously. "Bradley's parents expect a certain kind of wedding. Stephanie replied, scrolling to show me elaborate floral arrangements. His mother's best friend's daughter got married at the Westbrook estate last year. We can't do something less impressive. I nodded, trying to be supportive while mentally calculating what contribution I could reasonably make on a retired teacher's pension. What's your total budget looking like? Stephanie waved dismissively. We're still finalizing details, but Bradley's parents are covering most of it. They've been extremely generous. I relaxed slightly, relieved that the financial burden wouldn't fall too heavily on Stephanie and Bradley themselves. That's wonderful. I'd like to contribute what I can, of course. She smiled tightly. We'll discuss that later. Now, what do you think about these bridesmaid dresses? As weeks passed, Stephanie became increasingly consumed with wedding preparations. Our conversations centered exclusively around color schemes, photographer portfolios, and guest lists that seemed to grow with each discussion. Whenever I suggested more affordable alternatives, Stephanie would sigh and remind me that this day needed to be perfect, and that Bradley's family had certain expectations. I began noticing subtle digs about my lifestyle choices, comments about how I could afford nicer clothes if I wasn't wasting money on that old car, questions about why a widow needed a 2-bedroom house, suggestions that my retirement activities were frivolous compared to the important milestone of her wedding. Each remark stung, but I tried to empathize. Wedding planning is stressful, and Stephanie had always placed great importance on appearances. I reminded myself that this phase would pass, and we'd find our footing again once the celebration was over. I had no idea that the Mustang, my refuge and joy, would become the catalyst for a family rupture I never saw coming. The Sunday when everything changed began innocently enough. It was early April, with spring finally asserting itself after a particularly dreary winter. I had spent the morning changing the oil in the Mustang and was sitting on my porch enjoying a well-deserved lemonade when Stephanie's BMW pulled into my driveway. This was unexpected. Stephanie rarely visited without calling first, especially on weekends, which she typically reserved for brunches with Bradley's family or activities with her friends. But I was delighted to see her, hoping perhaps the wedding stress had eased enough for her to simply want to spend time with her mother. "What a nice surprise," I called out as she approached, noticing she was wearing the polished camera-ready look she adopted for important meetings. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, and her hair styled in loose waves. Something about her deliberate appearance gave me a flicker of unease. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, kissing my cheek before settling into the wicker chair beside me. "The car's looking good." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely pleased by her comment. "Tom from the car club helped me fix that persistent rattle in the passenger door yesterday. You've put a lot into it." Stephanie's gaze lingered on the Mustang gleaming dark green in the driveway. "How much do you think it's worth now?" The question caught me off guard. I haven't really thought about it that way. More than I bought it for, certainly given all the restoration work. "But ballpark figure," she pressed. "I suppose around 40,000, maybe more to the right buyer. Classic Mustangs in good condition hold their value well." I studied her expression. "Why do you ask?" Stephanie set down her untouched lemonade and turned to face me directly. "Mum, I've been thinking. The wedding budget has gotten a bit more complicated than we initially planned." My stomach tightened. "Oh, Bradley's parents are being very generous, but some unexpected costs have come up. The venue required a larger deposit than we anticipated, and the photographer we really want has a premium package that includes a second shooter and drone footage." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I think you should sell the car to help pay for the wedding." The words hung in the air between us. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "Sell the Mustang," I repeated slowly. "Yes," Stephanie continued, words coming faster now. "It's just sitting there most of the time, and you've already enjoyed the restoration process. You could sell it and help make my wedding day special, then maybe start another project later if you want." I felt a surge of emotions: shock, hurt, disbelief. Stephanie, this car means a lot more to me than just a project. Your stepfather and I dreamed of owning this model for years. Restoring it helped me through grieving him. It connects me to James. Stephanie's expression hardened. It's a car, Mum. An object. I'm your daughter. Are you saying you care more about a machine than my wedding day? That's not what I'm saying at all, I responded, trying to keep my voice level. I'm happy to contribute to your wedding. I can offer $10,000 from my savings, which is significant on my fixed income. $10,000? Stephanie scoffed. The wedding is costing over $100,000. Bradley's parents are contributing $60,000. Even Dad and Linda are giving $30,000. I felt ambushed. This was the first I'd heard concrete numbers, and they were astronomical. $100,000 for one day. Stephanie, that's excessive. That's a down payment on a house. It's the most important day of my life, her voice rose. And Bradley's family knows everyone in the financial sector. This wedding is also about making connections and impressions. The conversation devolved rapidly. Each attempt I made to explain the car's significance was met with accusations of selfishness. Each suggestion of more reasonable wedding expectations was dismissed as evidence that I didn't understand Stephanie's world or care about her future. You've always been like this, Stephanie said bitterly. Practical to the point of stinginess. Dad always said you didn't understand the importance of investing in appearances. The mention of Richard's opinions stung sharply. Your father and I had different values. That's why we didn't last. Well, his values helped him build a successful real estate business while you stayed stuck in the same teaching job for 30 years, Stephanie retorted. I took a deep breath, trying to diffuse the escalating tension. I loved teaching. Not all success is measured in dollars. I thought I had taught you that. Save the life lessons. Stephanie stood abruptly. I need to know if you're going to help me or not. Real help, not a token amount. I've offered what I can afford, I said firmly. $10,000 and all the support I can give with planning and preparations. But I won't sell the car. Stephanie gathered her purse, face flushed with anger. Fine, I'll remember this when Bradley and I are planning our future holidays and deciding where to spend our time. The threat was clear and deliberate. Think about what really matters, Mum, she said as she walked to her car. Family should come first. As I watched her drive away, I felt simultaneously numb and overwhelmed. How had a surprise visit transformed into this ultimatum? Was I being selfish? The car represented more than metal and mechanics to me, but was I overvaluing a material possession at the cost of my relationship with my only child? I spent a sleepless night questioning my priorities, replaying the conversation and wondering where we had gone so wrong. The following week brought silence from Stephanie. I called twice, leaving careful voicemails expressing my love and desire to discuss things further. No response. I sent a text suggesting we meet again when emotions weren't running so high. It showed as read but unanswered. Meanwhile, I scoured my finances looking for any other resources I could tap to increase my wedding contribution without touching my limited retirement security or selling the Mustang. There wasn't much flexibility in a retired teacher's budget. 5 days after our confrontation, I opened Facebook to see Stephanie had posted photos from a cake tasting. She looked radiant, sampling elegantly decorated miniature cakes alongside Bradley and his mother. The caption read, "Finding the perfect flavors for our perfect day at Thompson Wedding 2025. The wedding planning was clearly proceeding without pause and without me. That evening, my phone finally rang with Stephanie's ringtone. Hello? I answered quickly, relief flooding through me. Have you reconsidered? No greeting, just the blunt question. Stephanie, I've looked at my finances again. I can possibly increase my contribution to $15,000, but it would mean postponing some necessary home repairs. That's not what I asked. Her voice was cold. Are you selling the car or not? I can't do that, honey. Please try to understand. No, you understand. she interrupted. That car is worth at least $40,000 by your own admission. You're choosing an object over your only daughter's wedding day. I'm not choosing the car over you, I tried to explain. This isn't about the money itself. It's about what that car represents to me. It's one of my few connections to James, and the restoration process helped me survive losing him. James wasn't even my real father, Stephanie's voice rose. And now you're using him as an excuse to ruin my wedding. The conversation deteriorated from there. Stephanie's accusations became increasingly harsh. I was controlling. I was jealous of her happiness. I had always been a disappointment as a mother. Each word cut deeper than the last. If you won't sell that stupid car, she finally declared, then don't expect an invitation to my wedding. You don't mean that, I whispered, shocked by the escalation. Try me, she replied. You have 1 week to decide what matters more to you, your dead husband's car or your living daughter's wedding day. The call ended abruptly, leaving me shaking. Over the next few days, I received several unexpected messages from extended family members. My cousin Janet called to ask why I was being difficult about Stephanie's wedding. My nephew Michael texted asking if everything was okay, mentioning he'd heard there was drama about wedding funding. Even my sister Nancy phoned unusually diplomatic as she suggested I might want to consider all angles of the situation. It became clear that Stephanie was sharing her version of events widely, a narrative that cast me as a selfish mother refusing to help with her daughter's wedding while sitting on a valuable asset. I learned through Nancy that Richard and his second wife Linda had publicly committed to contributing $30,000 toward the wedding. The implicit competition was clear. My ex-husband was stepping up while I apparently refused. What hurt most was knowing that no one was hearing the full story. No one understood what the Mustang meant beyond its monetary value. No one was questioning why a wedding needed to cost as much as a college education. My car club friends became an unexpected source of support. When I tearfully explained the situation during our Saturday gathering, they responded with understanding rather than judgment. Family can be complicated, said Tom, the retired mechanic who had helped me rebuild the Mustang's transmission. But you can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Seems to me, added Diane, who restored vintage motorcycles, that the issue isn't really about the car, it's about boundaries and respect. Their perspective helped steady me as the formal wedding invitation arrived exactly 6 days after Stephanie's ultimatum. Inside the cream envelope with elaborate calligraphy was a handwritten note. This can still be fixed if you make the right choice. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost took my breath away. This wasn't my daughter asking for help. This was an adult using emotional blackmail to get what she wanted. That evening, I wrote a careful response declining to sell the Mustang, but reiterating my offer of $15,000 and my emotional support throughout the wedding process. I expressed my love for Stephanie and my hope that we could find common ground. The response came within minutes of the delivery confirmation. You've made your choice. Consider your invitation revoked. Please don't contact me again about the wedding. Accompanying the text was a notification that Stephanie had blocked me on social media. Just like that, I was exiled from my only daughter's life and upcoming wedding. The realization hit me like physical pain, a hollowness in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was a car, even one with deep emotional significance, worth this estrangement? I sat in the Mustang that night, not driving anywhere, just sitting in the quiet darkness, running my hands over the steering wheel James would never hold, and wondered if I had failed as a mother. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of grief and confusion. Every morning I woke with the momentary amnesia of sleep, then the crushing remembrance of the rift with Stephanie. Every night I lay awake replaying our last conversations, imagining alternative outcomes. I discovered quickly how complete a digital blocking could be. My Instagram and Facebook feeds no longer showed updates from Stephanie's accounts. My text messages went undelivered. Calls went straight to voicemail. Through mutual friends and family, I heard fragments about the wedding preparations continuing at full speed. The custom gown fitting, the elaborate floral arrangements being finalised, the bachelor and bachelorette parties planned for exclusive destinations. My sister Nancy tried to serve as an intermediary, approaching Stephanie during a family dinner that I hadn't been invited to attend. She shut me down immediately, Nancy reported afterward. Said you had made your position clear and she had nothing more to discuss until you came to your senses. Even my closest allies began suggesting compromise. It's just a car, Nancy ventured carefully. Maybe selling it would be worth repairing this relationship. What they couldn't understand was that conceding to this demand would fundamentally change my relationship with Stephanie. If I surrendered to emotional manipulation now, where would the boundary be drawn next time the Mustang, once my joy and solace, became complicated? Some days I couldn't bear to look at it, feeling a wave of guilt when I passed it in the driveway. Other days I'd sit in it, finding comfort in the familiar leather seats and the faint scent of the polish James had always preferred. I withdrew from most social activities, embarrassed by the situation and tired of explaining my side. My car club friends noticed my absence and began checking in regularly. Diane brought homemade soup. Tom stopped by to help with yard work I had been neglecting. You should come to the Sunday meet-up, Tom urged during one visit. Getting out would do you good. I declined, not ready to face questions about Stephanie or the wedding I would apparently not be attending. In a moment of weakness, I actually researched what the Mustang might sell for if I decided to give in. The market value had indeed increased with the quality of the restoration. I could probably get close to $50,000 for it to the right buyer. My finger hovered over Stephanie's contact information, contemplating the surrender. Then I thought about what such a capitulation would teach my daughter about relationships, about respect, about valuing people. I couldn't do it. Some prices were too high, even for peace. Then came the morning when I ran into Bradley's mother, Judith, at the local coffee shop. I nearly turned and left when I spotted her, but she had already seen me. Awkwardness hung between us as we waited for our orders. Marion, she finally acknowledged with a tight smile. Judith, I nodded. How are the wedding plans coming along? Busy times, she replied vaguely. Everyone's contributing to make it special. The emphasis on everyone wasn't subtle. Yes, I've offered $15,000, I said directly. It was what I could manage without selling assets important to me. Judith's perfectly maintained eyebrows rose slightly. $15,000, Stephanie mentioned you weren't able to contribute anything. My heart sank. That's not accurate. I offered what I could from my savings, but I declined to sell my late husband's restored car to fund more. I see. Judith's expression shifted subtly. Stephanie described the situation differently. Before I could respond, the barista called her name, and Judith collected her drink with visible relief. Best of luck to you, she said, already turning to leave. The encounter left me shaken. What other distortions was Stephanie spreading? How much of her narrative was being accepted without question? That evening, I wrote Stephanie a letter, an actual handwritten letter on stationery expressing my love, my hurt, my boundaries, and my continuing offer of financial and emotional support within my means. I poured my heart onto 3 pages, explaining again what the Mustang represented and asking if we could find a path forward based on mutual respect. I mailed it the next morning with delivery confirmation. 3 days later, it arrived back in my mailbox, unopened with "Return to sender" written across it in Stephanie's distinctive handwriting. That rejection hit harder than all the previous ones. Not even willing to hear my perspective, not even curious about what I might have to say. I hit rock bottom that night, sobbing in my bedroom, cluttered with photo albums I had been looking through, seeking connections to happier times. Pictures of Stephanie as a gap-toothed elementary schooler, as a serious middle schooler with braces, as a beautiful high school graduate. Where had that connection gone? How had money and status supplanted the bond? I thought was unbreakable. I felt entirely alone, judged by many and understood by few. The temptation to simply give in to sell the car and end this painful standoff pressed heavily upon me, but something deep within resisted. Some fundamental understanding that this wasn't really about a car at all. This was about dignity, autonomy, and the nature of love itself. 2 weeks of complete silence passed. The wedding date loomed just over a month away. I had resigned myself to missing my only daughter's marriage ceremony, a thought that brought fresh waves of grief whenever it surfaced. Then, unexpectedly, my phone chimed with a text message from Stephanie. "Mum, I've been thinking about our situation. Maybe we both overreacted. Could we meet for dinner tomorrow night, just the two of us? 7 p.m. at Alessandro's. I think it's time we talked." My heart leapt. A reconciliation offer. I read and reread the message, analysing every word for hidden meanings or conditions. It seemed straightforward, an olive branch extended after weeks of painful silence. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on a simple, "I would love that. Thank you for reaching out. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Hope surged through me. Perhaps Stephanie had realised the wedding planning pressure had pushed her to extremes. Maybe she missed her mother. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other without either of us having to completely surrender our positions. The next 24 hours were a flurry of nervous preparation. I made a hair appointment, wanting to look my best. I purchased a new blouse in Stephanie's favourite shade of blue. I carefully selected a small peace offering, a vintage handkerchief embroidered with lilies that had belonged to my grandmother, something old and meaningful Stephanie could carry on her wedding day. I rehearsed what I might say, hoping to find words that would bridge our divide without triggering fresh conflict. I wanted to validate her excitement about the wedding while still maintaining my own boundaries. I was prepared to increase my financial contribution slightly if it would help, perhaps, by taking on a specific element of the wedding, like the rehearsal dinner. Driving to Alessandro's, an upscale Italian restaurant Stephanie had always favoured, I felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The reservation was under Stephanie's name, and the hostess led me toward a private dining room in the back, rather than the main area. "Your daughter requested privacy for your conversation," she explained with a smile. The consideration touched me. Stephanie had anticipated this might be an emotional discussion requiring discretion. As the hostess opened the door to the private room, my first observation was that no food had been ordered yet. My second was that the table was covered not with place settings but with documents and folders. My third and most shocking was that Stephanie wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was my ex-husband Richard, impeccable as always in an expensive suit. Flanking them were 2 men in business attire who I didn't recognise. "Mum," Stephanie greeted me without warmth. "Please sit down." Confused and suddenly wary, I took the single empty chair across from this unexpected gathering. "I thought we were having dinner," I said, looking directly at Stephanie. "Just the two of us." "This is more important than dinner," Richard interjected. "We're here to resolve the wedding contribution situation once and for all." One of the unknown men extended his hand. "Gordon Fielding, attorney," he introduced himself. "And this is my colleague Maxwell Wright." The second man nodded curtly. I felt ambushed and disoriented. "I don't understand. Why do we need lawyers to discuss a family matter?" "Because you've been unreasonable," Richard said bluntly. "And sometimes legal clarity is necessary when emotions cloud judgment." Stephanie pushed a document across the table toward me. "We've prepared a contract for the sale of the Mustang. A collector client of Gordon's is prepared to pay $52,000 for it based on the photos and description we provided." My hands trembled as I processed what was happening. "You showed photos of my car to a stranger without my permission. You set up this ambush." "We're trying to solve a problem," Stephanie replied, her voice businesslike. "The wedding is 5 weeks away, and we need to finalise the budget. The sale proceeds will go directly to the wedding vendors, with any remainder being yours to keep. This isn't a reconciliation dinner, I said slowly, the betrayal dawning on me. This is a trap. It's an opportunity, corrected the lawyer named Maxwell. Ms. Thompson, your daughter has expressed that this classic car was potentially purchased with commingled funds during your marriage to Mr. Anderson. Richard leaned forward. James may have helped finance that car using money that should have been going towards Stephanie's support and education. That's completely false, I said, anger rising. I purchased the Mustang 2 years after James died, using my own retirement funds. Stephanie was an adult with her own career by then. There was no child support involved. Nevertheless, Gordon continued smoothly, there are potential grounds to contest ownership if the purchase depleted assets that would otherwise have been part of James's estate, to which Stephanie has claims as his stepdaughter. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you threatening legal action if I don't sell my car? We're exploring all options, Richard replied. Stephanie is very upset about your refusal to support her wedding appropriately. I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the person I had raised any flicker of discomfort at this extreme approach. Her expression remained impassive, almost smug. Please read through the agreement, Stephanie instructed. The buyer is ready to complete the transaction immediately. We've even arranged for transport of the vehicle tomorrow. The presumption was breathtaking. They had planned everything, assuming I would simply capitulate when confronted by legal pressure and my ex-husband's intimidation tactics. I took the document not because I had any intention of signing it, but because I needed a moment to process this stunning betrayal. As I slowly turned the pages, reading clauses about transfer of title and distribution of funds, a strange calm began to settle over me. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. This wasn't even about money. This was about power and control, about treating people as resources to be manipulated rather than individuals to be respected. The room remained tensely silent as I reviewed the document. Stephanie fidgeted slightly, glancing at her watch. Richard exchanged knowing looks with the attorneys. They were waiting for me to break, to give in, to surrender to their collective pressure. After thoroughly reading every word, I carefully set the papers down on the table and looked directly at my daughter. Is this really what you want? I asked quietly. To force your mother to sell something precious to her through intimidation and legal threats? What I want is for you to act like a mother for once, Stephanie snapped. To put me first instead of yourself. I have put you first your entire life, I replied evenly. I worked extra jobs to pay for dance lessons and summer camps. I stayed in a school district with lower pay because changing jobs would have disrupted your education. I contributed to your college fund even when your father's child support was late. Ancient history, Richard waved dismissively. We're dealing with the present situation. Yes, we are, I agreed, suddenly feeling stronger. And the present situation is that my adult daughter and her father have orchestrated an ambush complete with lawyers to coerce me into selling my personal property. It's a car, Mum, Stephanie said with exasperation. Just a stupid car. It's not about the car, I said, my voice steady now. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that I am a person with my own values and choices, not just an ATM for your wedding expenses. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Richard threatened. Sign the papers or we'll pursue legal action regarding the vehicle's purchase. I stood up, surprising them all with my sudden movement. You will do no such thing. The car was purchased with my retirement funds after James died, with no connection whatsoever to any marital assets or child support. Any lawsuit would be frivolous, and you know it. The lawyers exchanged glances, and I realized the legal threat was largely a bluff. Furthermore, I continued finding strength I didn't know I had. A truly loving relationship isn't built on ultimatums and coercion. It's built on mutual respect and understanding. Spare us the Hallmark card wisdom. Stephanie rolled her eyes. Are you signing or not? Looking at this gathering, my ex-husband who had cheated and manipulated throughout our marriage, the daughter who had apparently inherited his worst qualities, and 2 hired lawyers willing to participate in this charade. Something shifted permanently inside me. No, I said simply. I will not be signing anything. My offer of $15,000 still stands, but I will not be bullied, manipulated, or threatened into giving more. I picked up the contract and deliberately tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces fall onto the table. You're making a huge mistake, Richard warned. The mistake was thinking reconciliation was possible without respect, I replied. As I turned to leave, Stephanie called after me. If you walk out now, don't expect to ever be part of my life again. This is your last chance. I paused at the door, looking back at my daughter's face. Beautiful, familiar, and suddenly strange to me. Love doesn't come with ultimatums, Stephanie. When you're ready for a relationship based on mutual respect rather than what I can give you, I'll be waiting. I walked out of the private dining room past curious diners who had undoubtedly heard raised voices. One elderly couple looked particularly concerned. Everything all right, dear? The woman asked gently. In that moment, I made a decision not to keep this toxic secret. No, I answered honestly. My daughter and ex-husband just ambushed me with lawyers to force me to sell my car to pay for her $100,000 wedding. Their shocked expressions mirrored how absurd the situation truly was. Outside in the parking lot, the reality of what had just happened hit me full force. I barely made it to my car, not the Mustang which I'd deliberately left at home before sobs overtook me. The betrayal cut so deeply I could barely breathe. The calculated nature of the trap, the text message offering reconciliation, the private dining room, the lawyers waiting in ambush, showed a level of manipulation that was almost incomprehensible from my own child. I sat there crying until I had no tears left, then drove home in a state of numb shock, nearly missing a red light and swerving to avoid a raccoon crossing the road. At home, I collapsed into bed, fully dressed, physically and emotionally exhausted. Sleep wouldn't come as my mind replayed the confrontation from every angle, searching for what I could have done differently, not just tonight, but throughout Stephanie's life. Had I failed to teach her empathy? Had Richard's influence been that corrosive? Had the pursuit of status and material success warped her understanding of what truly matters? By morning, red-eyed and hollowed out, I had reached a painful clarity. I could not enable Stephanie's entitled behaviour any longer, even if that meant accepting her threat of permanent estrangement. Sometimes love meant saying no, even when it broke your heart to do so. The days following the ambush dinner were the darkest I had experienced since James's death. The grief was different, but no less intense, mourning a living daughter who had chosen to cut me from her life rather than accept my boundaries. I moved through my routines like a ghost, teaching my part-time community college math class, mechanically paying bills, buying groceries. But inside I was shattered, questioning every parenting decision I had ever made. My support network proved invaluable during this period. My sister Nancy, initially sympathetic to Stephanie's position, was outraged when I described the lawyer ambush. That crosses every line, she declared, bringing over casseroles and checking on me daily. Richard's fingerprints are all over this scheme. My car club friends rallied around me as well. Tom and Diane took turns inviting me to dinner, careful not to leave me alone too many evenings in a row. My former teaching colleagues organised a weekend hike to get me out of the house and into healing natural settings. Gradually, I began to see my therapist, Dr. Lawson, again, someone I had visited regularly after James died. She helped me process the complex emotions, the guilt, the anger, the profound sadness, and the lingering question of whether I had made the right choice. You're grieving, she explained during one session, not just the loss of your relationship with Stephanie, but the loss of who you thought she was. That insight resonated deeply. I had always seen my daughter as strong-willed and ambitious, but fundamentally kind. The person who had sat across from me at Alessandro's with cold eyes and calculated threats was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. As the wedding date approached, I made a difficult decision. I wrote a card expressing my love and well wishes, enclosed the promised $15,000 check, and mailed it to the address on the wedding invitation. I didn't expect a response, and none came. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned the check had been cashed. The wedding day itself was surreal, knowing my only child was getting married while I sat home alone, looking through old photo albums and trying not to imagine what the ceremony looked like. Nancy, who attended, sent me a brief text. Extravagant. Over the top. You're not missing much beyond the actual vows. Later, social media posts from guests. I remained blocked by Stephanie, but could see public posts from mutual connections showed an event of staggering opulence, ice sculptures, a 10-piece orchestra, floral arrangements, taller than the guests, and a 7-tier cake. The estimated cost, according to Nancy, had ballooned to nearly $150,000. All that money, I murmured to my empty living room. And what does it purchase one day of showing off? Not happiness, not character, not lasting joy. The surprising ally emerged 2 weeks after the wedding, Judith Bradley's mother, who called me unexpectedly one afternoon. "Marion, this is Judith Thompson. I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied, puzzled by the contact. "I wanted to... Well, I felt I should reach out." She sounded uncomfortable. "The wedding was beautiful, but I've been concerned about some of Stephanie's behaviours during the planning and afterward." Over the next half hour, Judith cautiously shared observation about Stephanie's demanding attitude with vendors, her dismissive treatment of Bradley's input, and her complaints about my absence, despite being the one who had disinvited me. Bradley is discovering aspects of her personality that weren't apparent during their courtship, Judith explained delicately. The wedding expenses have also created some financial strain they didn't anticipate. They're already talking about asking family for help with a house down payment. The conversation was revealing in many ways, not least in confirming that my boundaries had been appropriate. Judith's final comment stayed with me long after we hung up. "You know, I initially judged you for not contributing more to the wedding. Now I wonder if you were the only one who truly understood what was happening." Summer faded into fall, and gradually the raw wound of estrangement developed the protective callus of time. I recommitted to my routines, teaching my community college classes, meeting with my car club, volunteering at the local literacy centre. I began taking the Mustang to car shows again, finding joy in sharing James's and my dream with appreciative enthusiasts. 6 months after the wedding, I was grocery shopping when I literally bumped carts with Stephanie in the produce section. We both froze, equally startled by the unexpected encounter. "Mum," she acknowledged stiffly. "Stephanie," I replied, noting she looked tired, the confident polish somewhat diminished. "How are you?" "Fine," she answered automatically, then hesitated. "Actually, things have been challenging. Bradley's company is downsizing and the economy isn't great for marketing positions either." I nodded, unsure what response she was seeking. "I'm sorry to hear that. Change can be difficult." Stephanie fingered an apple without meeting my eyes. "We've had to cut back on some expenses. The mortgage on the house is higher than we anticipated." The unspoken request hung in the air between us. After a moment, I simply said, "Would you like to get coffee sometime and really talk, not about money, but about rebuilding our relationship?" She looked surprised, perhaps expecting either an immediate offer of financial help or continued coldness. Maybe, yes, that might be good." We exchanged phone numbers. She had a new one I didn't recognize, and 3 days later met at a neutral coffee shop. The conversation was awkward, halting with the weight of unresolved conflict heavy between us. I maintained clear, loving boundaries. Yes, I would be part of her life again if she wanted. No, I would not be an ATM for her lifestyle choices, Yes, I cared deeply about her well-being. No, that didn't mean I would enable financial irresponsibility. It was the beginning of a different kind of relationship, more distant than I would have chosen, but more honest than what we had before. Small steps, a text exchange here, a brief lunch there, careful navigation of sensitive topics. The Mustang remained my joy and solace, but I found a way to extend its purpose. I began taking it to charity events, benefiting educational programs, where people could take photos with the classic car for a small donation. The car that had allegedly come between us now funded scholarships for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Throughout this journey, I learned profound lessons about the nature of love, versus enabling about maintaining dignity while keeping my heart open about the courage required to say no to someone you would give your life for. The road to healing wasn't straight or smooth. There were setbacks and painful moments, times when old patterns threatened to re-emerge. But slowly, steadily, I rebuilt my life around authentic connections rather than manipulation. I discovered that while I couldn't control Stephanie's choices or guarantee a close mother-daughter relationship, I could ensure my own actions aligned with my deepest values. Sometimes love is best expressed through limits rather than acquiescence. Sometimes the most valuable gift we can give our children is the example of self-respect. The journey continues with no perfect resolution or fairy tale ending, just real people finding their way through complicated relationships, learning and growing through painful experiences. As I drive my Mustang along coastal highways with the windows down, I feel a freedom and peace I once thought impossible. The car represents not just my connection to James, but my reclaimed sense of self-worth and autonomy that I've come to believe is beyond price. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members, even when it broke your heart to do so? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the most personal growth. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons. Thank you for listening, and remember that true love sometimes means having the courage to say no.